Excellent. All right, quick test. Oh, there we go, winning. Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm just going to shake you up a little bit. Could I just get a show of hands for who would consider themselves more on, say, the business side of things? Okay, cool. A show of hands for who would say they're more on the design side of things? Okay, getting a good spread. Cool. And some both. And a show of hands for who doesn't fit into that category. Awesome. I love that. Okay, I am going to be talking about service design at scale, designing for impact. Actually, I was really inspired by the Q&A there, so a lot of the sort of questions coming out, I think I'm hopefully going to touch on. So hopefully it sort of works out quite well. So what I think, what I've realized from doing a lot of large-scale service design is that when you're designing products and services, it creates a lot of change to business processes. It also leads quite often, I'm finding more and more in my work, to organizational transformation. And when you start changing business processes and when you start transforming organizations, you have so many challenges to overcome. And quite often, it isn't the direct sort of design challenge that you're trying to solve that you're impacting. It's pretty much everywhere else that you're impacting. And then I find that, sort of designing for impact, for many years now, design work has been challenged not to be fluffy, not to be up in the clouds as we're talking about, but really showing how it's creating results, it's creating the return on investment, or there's some sort of concepts around the return on design investment. And it's those kind of challenges of impacting a wider organization as well as having to prove and show the value in the design work you're doing or the impact that's really kind of led me into this area of thinking. And then I'm a designer, so as designers, we also want to see impact for the work we're doing. We're curious about the world, the problems we're solving. We're very creative, and designers, we just love to solve problems. But we want to see, we want to see our designs in action, not just sort of sat on a desk or sat in someone's inbox. We want to see that we've made a difference with the work that we're doing. We put a lot of passion, a lot of energy into understanding the problem and trying to solve the problem. We want to see that we've made a difference. And really, as a designer, and I've worked and created a lot of design teams around the world, we're not satisfied if we don't have enough time to do a good problem-solving activity. We don't really feel like we're making a difference. And then to sort of the classic quote of, designers want to put a ding in the universe, they want to make a difference, they want to be satisfied for the work they're doing. So briefly, just a bit of context, I'm Oli Shaw. I've been doing kind of design and creative stuff for around 18 years now, and worked all across the world, transforming design studios, creating new design studios, integrating design studios with consultancies. Okay. And then on top of that, kind of helping solve business problems, improving customer experiences, and also helping improving employee experiences as well. I'm working at Designit as the Global Service Design Director, and that really blinks, doesn't like it. All right, so let's try moving that up, take power out. There we go. Okay, skip back in. Awesome, okay, recap. So doing global service design, and that lets me continue to transform experiences, solving business problems, creating new services, improving them at a really global scale. And why I'm sort of bringing this up is at a global scale, you have even more stakeholders to answer to, you have even more proof you need to provide that you're creating a very real impact, and that impact can be taken to shareholders, or it can be taken to employees, or it can be sort of measured, whether it's by sentiment or other reasons, within sort of customer groups. So really what I'm going to kind of get into is designing at scale and some of the lessons I've learned, some of the experiences I've had, kind of designing for impact and trying to unpack that a little bit, and then really kind of just bringing it all together. I'm going to start by, I'm a huge fan of kind of sci-fi futures. I really enjoy looking at the future and future cities. Shows like Continuum or Mr. Robot, they talk about these mega corporations that are even more powerful than governments controlling the landscape. And I just really find that quite fascinating. And this one's from Mr. Robot. If you've not seen it, it's an awesome show. Together, we can change the world. So while we don't live in one of these future scenarios, there's an element of truth in this. For large organizations, they can greatly influence nations. They can, and much like large brands, they can actually influence society as a whole, and sort of multiple societies at any one time. And it's quite interesting when you start thinking of scale in those terms. In 1977, Eames released a short film about the powers of 10, and it was about exploring the importance of scale by adding another zero to it. And what I really want to explore here is this notion of design and designing at scale, and that change can happen in a range of different ways. So as we're just sort of zooming out, and then suddenly you're into changing nations and changing countries and continents to the whole world. But it all starts at a picnic on the ground, and the changes coming back out. All right, so we don't need to go through all of that. So I kind of thought about it a little bit, and I tried to break it down into a few different ways, and looking at kind of powers of 10 and adding zeros and things. So if you're designing at scale, there's the atomic design, the UI, from a digital perspective at least, the interface, and sort of Google Material, but just really looking at the individual elements and how individual elements can come together to make a difference, to make a change, and how you should have control over those kind of atomic little elements, putting them together in different ways. To look at kind of maybe an example around that, there was the $300 million button. And this was largely around, it kind of bridges into the next one, but it's largely around looking at the kind of UI elements and what a difference they can make and how they can affect the scale of different things that happen. So within the $300 million button, the article here actually kind of abstracts it, but when you sort of talk to the guy, it was around Amazon. And what they found was they were they made one change to one button, and 43% increase in sales because they changed one button. What they realized was within their kind of supermarket flow that when someone just got to the kind of the right confirmation, this is the order, you're ready to go and purchase, they'd put a sign-up process in saying it's going to make it so much easier when you come back next time. And if you're coming back the next time, it's really easy because you've got everything there, you just got to sign in. So they had a sort of register or sign in. And what they did is they changed that to continue, because through doing a bit of research and some understanding, they actually found that repeat visitors couldn't remember their password if it was their second time. They found that the first time people didn't really necessarily know if they wanted to sign up. They didn't necessarily want to give their details across. So by actually taking that stage out of the process and changing kind of register for just continue, you don't need to sign up to this site to make purchases. They had this $300 million button. The important point that I'm trying to get across here is just that there's small changes can make a huge impact and change quite a lot at scale. To take a slightly different example, I've been having a chat with a few people at Uber, and they were telling me that there's this sort of notion that with the surge pricing, if they have a whole number, people are much less likely to accept the surge pricing. I can't remember the exact percentages, but they found as long as it's a point something, 0.1, 0.2, people would happily pay more, or they get more traction with more people using it, even if it's a fraction higher. There's something around the whole number. So they found by shifting it from never saying 2.0 to saying 2.1 or 2.2, that actually more people are accepting this. And again, it's just these small atomic little changes that have quite a big ripple effect. So the next stage is maybe a feature or a flow. what kind of features are going to make a change, what kind of adjustments to flows. I'm going to talk a little bit about Snapchat. So Snapchat acquired Luxi, I think, I can't remember the note now, in the region of like 47 million, and this company, Luxi, basically were just making lenses, and animated lenses that looked at it, and Snapchat went, great, lenses is a key feature for us, it's going to be a differentiator, audience engagement. They actually acquired this company just to put the features in and to sort of ramp up quickly. So by adding in this sort of feature or enriching the feature, they've seen a large traction in their engagement, in people using it, sharing it, and actually now, even from a cultural impact perspective, I'm sure quite a few of you have seen, or maybe it's just the people that I've been following, but the sort of the dog nose with the licking tongue is everywhere. There's so many pictures in every other medium, and that kind of started, well, it's created using Snapchat. So by creating a feature or a flow, they've not only increased their own usage, but they've increased their kind of penetration and visibility elsewhere. So much so that it's becoming a cultural phenomenon now, and there are people doing paintings of using it, and it's disseminating into lots of different places. So then, if we kind of zoom out a little bit more, and we go right, kind of apps. Okay, so apps within an ecosystem, within a product suite. Stepping back a touch further, I mean, there's sort of, I won't get into it in too much depth, but the kind of classic examples of, say, Instagram. Instagram was, brought for 1 billion, and it had just over 100 million users to integrate into a suite portfolio, of other services offering. But it's just like that's kind of one app, one product, and the sort of the scale or the impact, 100 million users, worth that much? Questionable. If we look maybe at a different example, there's Coke Life. I don't know whether many of you are aware of Coke Life. Coke Life is an experimental Coke product, not using sugars, using natural sugar, not using sweeteners, using natural sugars, and it's not been much of a success at all. In fact, it's kind of deteriorating. I think in the overall Coke portfolio, it's like 2.6% of their, kind of their products they're outputting. But it's an innovation program for Coke. They're trying new things. They're trying to do new things with it. But it's about having a product within a suite of products. So then, just kind of recapping, we're looking at the interface elements. We've got specific features. We've got products. So then we kind of take a bigger step out, add another zero, and start looking at maybe the service or the system. Actually, I was living in Turkey for the best part of a year recently, and I got quite used to using this service called Yemek Sepete. I don't know if there are any Turkish people in the room. I apologize if my pronunciation's not so good. So Yemek Sepete is a delivery service. There's quite a few different ones around the world. Yemek Sepete actually operate in 57 cities in Turkey and Cyprus. It's got 9,000 members, customers, 2.9 million users, and what is it, 75,000 orders a day to 220,000 people on a daily basis. So for a service or a system, that's quite a wide reach, that's quite a big scale, it's quite an impact, and certainly within Turkey, it's the de facto delivery place to go to, connecting the smallest of little places with the most, any family, any person that just wants to get some food. So it was recently brought by a German company, Delivery Hero, for 589 million in cash and shares deal. So for a very successful established service, sold for quite a large amount, it's just interesting when you look at considering the scale of these things. A nice tangential part for this one was actually the CEO gave bonuses to all of his 115 employees, totaling 27 million from the share. When you talk about culture and acquisition and retaining staff after acquisition, that's certainly going to go a little way towards maintaining culture and sort of buy in with that. So then, if we take another step back, add another zero to this, we'll look at organizations, maybe on a global scale. So I was looking into some of the stats around Uber, because it's quite an easy one to talk around. They're in 70 countries. They've got 400 cities worldwide. They're doing, 1 million rides per day. And when you start looking at the reach of that, changes to that service, changes, improvements, to the way it works, the business model, the organization structure, you're touching 70 countries, 400 cities, and, affecting how 1 million people per day use a service. If you make a UI change, or if you make a change to a flow, you're creating quite a bit of impact, quite a large scale, so you have to be quite considered about what you're doing there. If we look at it from other perspectives as well, as a organization, it's completely destroying and disrupting the traditional taxi services. I mean, this was from one, not sure what the language is. I know in London there was huge protests. In Paris they were burning taxis. In Turkey they'd actually made a deal with the police that they couldn't operate at the airports. It was a very interesting experience when I came off the plane one day to get my Uber. But then on a more positive thing, they're using huge amounts of big data to look at where the journeys of taxis are ending, so they can make sure the cars are distributed well within a city to pick people up. They're also diversifying into multiple forms of transport, from bikes to choppers. There was choppers in Cannes and Dubai, boats. They've got Uber Boat in Istanbul. But also a wide range of transport pricing. So they're trying lots of different things. There's kind of Uber X or Uber Pool, and when I was in LA, there was like sort of 7 different options of pricing touch points. I think here there's like 3 different choices you've got. But one of the interesting things is, as you say, sort of organizations changing nations, they're actually now hiring political representation to help them with legislation, to help them change policies, within countries. So, quite scale. All right, so starting at the beginning, it gets very exciting for me when we're talking about scale of that big. No matter if you're working for a brand or a business, or if you're working for a consultancy or an agency, every design project should start at the beginning with a problem or an opportunity. Normally when you're given a problem or an opportunity to work on, some thinking has gone into articulating it somewhere along the lines. Some of the common requests I've had over the course of my kind of work, the requests kind of begin with, we need to change the navigation. We've got to change it. Or we need a new feature in the app. It's going to solve everything. We just got to put a new feature in there. We want an app. We've got to have an app. It's, the amount of times I had that, not so much recently, but yeah, it's like every request, 5 a week. We need an app. Okay, so why do you need an app? We want a new service or a brand. We're not reaching this audience. We're going to make a new brand for them. Okay. But me, like most designers, we're really curious. We like to understand the problem. Like, what is this problem? And in some cases, for me, most cases, I really like to question the problem. Has this really been identified correctly? Do you really need an app? Is that going to solve your problems? So, with each of these starting points, I like to unpack them a little bit, get into the details a little bit more, really understand the business objective that's driving them. And then when you start doing that enough times, you start seeing a very common pattern. If you kind of zoom out enough layers, you go, well, we want to reduce the costs. So we think an app's going to do it, or we think that, sort of changing the service is going to do it, putting a new feature, and we want to reduce the costs. We want to increase efficiency. Big driver, efficiency. We need to increase the efficiency. We want to grow the audience, always, like more audience. We need to grow the audience. Actually, no, we've got a good enough audience, but they're not engaged enough. We want to engage the audience more. Or ultimately, we want to make some more money, whether that's by cost reduction, whether that's by increase in usage, whether that's by increase in audience. Ultimately, we'd like to make some more money, please. And tying back to the Q&A from the last one, it's really important to ground the sort of design work in knowing what you're really trying to achieve. Because quite often it can change the shape of the problem that you're trying to solve. So if you're, instead of designing an app or a new feature or a change in flow, understanding that actually what you're trying to do here is to increase the efficiency, or to sort of increase the engagement and going, well, okay, let's understand that a little bit more, let's understand the factors that go into that. And maybe there's a way here that we can help reporting back or showing the sort of success and the impact of what we're doing in a more meaningful way. It can actually change the direction of quite a few different projects. It's just really important. So if I try and take an example and walk through, and I've had to abstract lots of these for confidentiality reasons, but hopefully they kind of still make sense. So if we take, there's an energy provider, and they, or to be honest, it can really provide, work with any service provider, from telecoms to energy to whatever. We want to reduce the amount of calls around bill complaints. We're getting so many calls around bill complaints. We want to reduce bill complaint calls, bill shock. Okay. So if we tackle this head on, going, great, I'm really excited, I want to work this out, people are phoning, bill shock, let's solve this, let's work that out, let's attack it head on, let's look at it within the call center, so what's the process for, customers complaining about their bill? How do they go through it, what are they doing? So let's understand that. Or, what is the scripts the call center people are using to communicate with the customers? Maybe there's something around there we could look at. Kind of what are the actions to resolution, how empowered are these call center operators really to resolve this sort of thing, and what are the steps that they need to go through? Maybe we can speed things up a little bit, maybe we can do things differently. How many of these things are resolved first time? If someone's phoning up unhappy, we get it resolved and they go away happy. How often is that kind of first time happiness coming through? Actually, how long does it take to resolve? I was in the Philippines last year in a call center. Interesting experience, a different story, but there was some of the cases were 21, 27 days to resolve a complaint and resolution, and it was just phenomenal. They sort of used it as their mini team case studies going through, and it's the one ticket was closed and then a different one was open, but actually it was the same customer with the same problem, and they kind of mapped this out, and they'd done a bit of data analysis to really work this out, and they said, well, this one customer had 21 or 27 days worth of phoning up trying to get this thing resolved. How long does it take? How many times is this customer having to phone in to fix this? And that kind of gets into what are the patterns within these calls being made. A lot of this kind of identification and problem solving is around the patterns and sort of trying to see how they're working. So then, really, the other one is just, well, how frequently is the same customer ringing back in or complaining? Is this actually, is not just a one-off, it's not just one problem that's taken a long time. Systematically, customers are phoning back every month because there's still an ongoing bigger issue within their bill that they're getting. It's not a one-off. So if we're trying to look at this from the customer perspective a little bit, there's quite a few different things we could look at from this, and I'll try and talk through. I'm not sure my handwriting is the best. We frequently see that the problems can be solved upstream. If you start mapping out this end-to-end journey of really what it is, the bill shock is like a point. Let's see if this, the bill shock is kind of here in the unhappy space, and what we start looking at is just going, well, okay, so let's map out this end-to-end journey, and let's be bold. It's an unlimited project because it's imaginary at the moment, so let's go all the way back. So the customer's looking for a provider. They're looking for someone to provide their service. Maybe they don't like the one they're with. Maybe they've just moved into a new property, or they have a new reason for wanting a provider, so they're looking around trying to choose who their provider might be. And then they get into this kind of, there's always a gully at this point. They're going, which plan should I get? What does this plan actually mean? What is it going to result in? How does it translate into my general life? Across all industries, there's a nice big kind of dip here in the customer's understanding of choosing a plan. And then they're sold a plan and they sign up for the process. And then, they go through and they start using the service, and then a little bit later, the bill comes in, and then they have to make a payment. Maybe it's automatic. And then they're a little unhappy because they're like, well, I wasn't expecting the bill to be that much, and why am I paying this much? And then they're phoning up because it's I need to speak to someone about this, so I've got to do something about it. Hopefully in the next stage there's a resolution, and if not, or maybe even if there is, it kind of moves through, and maybe they leave. They sort of exit the service and exit the plan. if we overlay some of the more kind of human-shaped interests onto this, we begin to see maybe some other opportunities within this. You know, maybe their expectations around how much they will be paying is kind of set. Oh, beautiful. Just crossing my fingers. Okay, so at the start, sort of maybe their expectations around what they're going to be paying are set, then maybe they're set wrong. There's an over-enthusiastic sales guy selling, you know, the plan is going to solve all of your problems, it'll do your washing and make you coffee in the morning, and it's just going to be for $9.99 a month, it's totally awesome. Or maybe just when they're looking at the plan, they just understood it wrong, and their expectations are way out of line with what's happening. But then also awareness of using the service. You know, maybe they're not really aware of how much they're using it. You know, you go data roaming in the EU with your phone, and suddenly, you know, a couple of £1,000 of data usage charges come flying in. You go, I had no idea. Why didn't you tell me I was using that much? Maybe they just, when they get the bill, you know, it's kind of okay, but they just really don't understand how it was calculated. There's no understanding of just like, well, what's gone in to make this big number that you're asking me to pay? I don't get what the kind of breakdown is. And then some of it is around how empowered they feel that they can actually change this. You know, am I now just kind of tied into this kind of contract or this sort of payment process, and I don't really understand what I can do to make a change, how I can resolve this. But actually there's an opportunity in the kind of resolution part, you know, that it may be that it was resolved in such a positive way, the customer feels more trusted, going, actually that was fine, you know, it's an awesome service, I'm going to go out and speak very highly of it because they solved the problem, got a lot of trust, I'm really delighted in the solution. I've actually had a few cases where we've managed to completely turn it around at the kind of unhappy part, with people actually becoming brand ambassadors because the resolution and the speed or the efficiency of making that change was so positive. If we maybe look at the original problem but from a different perspective, and maybe if we unpacked the business goal a little bit more, and maybe if it wasn't to reduce the number of complaint calls, but it could have actually been around, you know, we need to improve the efficiency of the call center and reduce the scale of our call centers. And they did a light bit of work, and they realized that maybe complaints was an area that they could scale down. Hey, we get a win-win, we get some customer delight, we reduce the amount of people we need to answer the phones because we're dropping, you know, 1,000 calls a day or something. And then you start looking around, well, you know, how did they prioritize that complaints was the area that they would get best efficiency from? How do they know that in order to reduce the scale of the call centers, that it's not going to have a knock-on effect to other things, or that actually, you know, there are other better ways of doing it? You know, even within this, one of the sort of stats I found was that the efficiency of a call center was actually driven by the people answering the phones, and a lot of call centers, offshore call centers, that I've experienced have an 80% churn rate in staff per year. So every 12 calendar months, 80% of the staff churn and change over. What that results in is actually it takes 18 days to train these people in how to answer the phones, how to resolve these complaints. So when you're thinking that 80% of the staff need to be trained for 18 days every time, that doesn't sound very efficient. Maybe there's a different way of approaching the efficiency and even the scale thing by either reducing the amount of people that are churning, giving them reasons why they shouldn't leave, or making it easier to train them, making it easier to use the systems. Efficiency could be tackled in quite a few different ways there. So the other way could be around, well, we actually know we need to improve our customer delight and our customer retention. We're losing some customers, we've got some bad sentiment, we've done some brand sentiment analysis, and we've got some, you know, unhappy people. What we're really trying to do is improve delight and retention. You know, we could have actually started looking at the packages they offer. Maybe people don't understand that, or they're not happy with the packages. You know, start looking at the reasons why people are cancelling their contracts, you know, why are people leaving, or even just the sort of the pain points within the service that are detractors, you know, which could have come from the initial sign-up or the onboarding, it could come from visibility of how they're using the service. Until you kind of dig into it a little bit more and look at it, it's you know, you need to understand these things. I'm going to speed up just a touch. You know, when we're doing these things at scale, you know, whether it's changing a button, whether it's adding a new feature, or whether it's creating a new app or a new service. You know, even the smallest of challenges, it touch on these kind of really complex, interconnected systems of each department within an organization has its own system that it's operating on, and if you make a change to an end-to-end journey, you start intersecting across silos of businesses that have each got their organization, each got their systems that they're using, and it gets an interesting mess of making a change here that ripples into a change here that ripples into a change here. In order to understand how we do that within kind of the service design practice, you map out your end-to-end journey, and you have the kind of the timeline across the top, which is always around kind of awareness and discovery and purchase and use, and growing. Maybe it's leaving, maybe it's returning. It depends on what the service is, whether it's a purchase journey or not. And then as you kind of come down and it's flashing, and hopefully it doesn't run away. There we go. As you come down from the top, you have the customer journey along the top. Then maybe you have the business processes, the business departments, and in some cases I've actually put the actual business owners within those areas that do it. Am I going to need to unplug it? And then if you come down another layer, you've got the technical systems. Technical systems before it disappears, there we go. And then you have the third parties. So as you come down, you have, well, this is what the customers are doing. This is what the business is doing. Did it just die and crash again? Hey, awesome. So yeah, what's the business doing? Which processes, which policies, which departments, which owners are responsible for these things? You have the systems. Which IT systems does it touch on? Some of these never get visible on the consumer's journey at all, on the user's journey, whether it's an employee or a consumer, same process. They never see the technical system. It goes deep down into 6 levels of Siebel or whatever system it's using. And then the third parties in a fulfillment journey, say if you're purchasing a mobile phone online, there's a third-party delivery service that needs to come and send it to you. They need to know your address, they need to know which device, they need to know when you're going to be in. It's an expensive item, sometimes you have to sign for it. So the customer journey of like, well, I go online, I buy a new phone, it gets delivered, I start using it, I activate it and things. It touches on so many different areas. And what we see by mapping this out, and honestly it's quite a challenge sometimes because you're crossing business silos to get this information out of them, is that you see there's gaps between these silos. You know, one department is just not talking to another, and then there's this, I love the term, there's kind of swivel chair patches between technical systems. There's a guy there that's sort of typing in one, he turns around, types the same detail into another, because it's so complicated to connect the two systems, it's much, much easier to have a person on a chair turning around, entering the data. We do what we can to make the systems flawless, but, it can create some errors and interesting things. Joy. So really what I'm trying to get to there, and hopefully it kind of flashes around behind me, is that the visible problem is probably just an indication of one or more problems that's happening further back within the stream. And it's really key to look at that end-to-end journey, because you start mapping backwards and you go, do you know what, if we make a change here or we make a change in this system here, this massive big problem over here, this becomes much smaller, doesn't become an issue. I think I've lost the clicker. Has it just died? I'd love to go to the next slide, I'm just waiting for the technology. No, it's going to skip like 3 slides ahead now. Yes, and we're in, okay. Maybe, okay. So that's to give you a vision of scale and some of the challenges, and now the important part, how to navigate large organizations and get design sold and used and believed in and valued. Getting design valued is a beautiful challenge. Impact is everything. Like, just taking a moment to pause for that. Impact is everything. It doesn't matter if you're a business person or a designer. Impact is literally everything. So from a business perspective, impacts, it's the success factor. It's the return on the investment. Design does cost money. It needs to show measurable results for the investment that's been made in it. You know, it might not cost a lot of money, it might cost a lot of money, you know, either way round, it's got to show some return on this. In order for design teams to grow within organizations, you need to show what you're doing, and it can't just be, well, we've designed this new app. It's like, well, what's the app done? And then as an agency or consultancy, you're going, well, you know, why should we pay you this money to do this? What is it really going to do for us as a business? It's a success factor for business. So looking at it from the designer perspective, I go so far to say that, you know, designers are here to sort of solve the problems, to create impacts. The work we do needs to be meaningful, otherwise why else are we doing it? You know, it's not just for the money. You know, how do we feel there's a long-lasting satisfaction for the design work we're doing? So for designers, I'd say that it's a satisfaction factor more than anything. In most of the studios around the world that I've been running and growing, at the end of the year, we do a little kind of get-together, do an internal workshop on ourselves and just see what we like and what we don't like and what we like to improve. The key theme, year after year, doesn't matter if it's Australia or Turkey or Dubai or America, wherever I've run it, yay, is that the designers just want to know what impacts they're creating. They want to know they've touched people's lives. They want to know they've made a difference. It's interesting technology. All right, let's see. Does it come back? There's a beautiful picture of a butterfly next. Just imagine it. So what, I think it's the clicking more than anything. What I was going to talk about with the butterfly is the butterfly effect. Impact can also be a way of understanding the decisions and changes that your actions are going to affect. So, as we were saying before, if you're going to change a button and suddenly it has just for a moment, it's helping with the imagination. So using impact as a measure for success, you tie it into the original kind of unpacked business goals, not that I'd like an app, but I'd like to increase, you know, retention. The butterfly effect, when you're breaking things across silos, is really important because when you come in as an agency or when you're inside an organization and you're suggesting some of these changes, you might be suggesting changes that greatly impact the business revenue model. You might be costing people's jobs. Actually, you know, one of the factors of, you know, efficiency is maybe that means downsizing because it's more efficient. It's really important to understand the impact of the decisions or the changes you're making and how it's going to affect everything. Okay, I may need it for this next part. Let's see. Or you could just all come down to the front and I'll turn my screen around. There we go. Come on. Yes. Yeah, there we go. Okay, I'll try and go quickly also because we've not got much time left. Some of the things that changes can affect, then, let's see, now it's, okay. So the changes we can do can affect the customer experience, as we'd guess. It can affect the employee experience. You know, do they need new training in something we've just released, something we're rolling out to them? Do they need to know how to use it? Is it going to change their daily job? And we need to either get them on board with how that's going to change their daily job or just actually how to use it. It can change the technology systems. A new platform is needed, which means there's a migration that's needed, which means people need to understand how to migrate from one to another, maybe trained in how to use this migration and how that impact can work. As I said, it can change the business, it can change the revenue opportunity. In some ways, it can actually bring in new revenue opportunities. It can affect the third-party businesses as well, as we were saying, that actually maybe you find that there's so many complaints coming from one fulfillment provider that you need to switch out and choose a different one. Still flashing, let's see if I can get there. So looking at how to measure the impacts of a solution can actually really help on focusing the problem. And it's as much about doing it up front as it is about doing it while you're in the project. It's not just about proving that, yes, design, it was worth the investment, invest more, do more. It's actually going, well, we've measured this and we've really identified the core problem here. We've got the data, we've got the details that tell us that this is the right problem, not the one further downstream, like we'll deal with that, but let's deal with this one first because that's going to affect everything else. So it can really help us focusing. Or even how to prioritize. Imagine you come up with 7 new service solutions for an end-to-end journey. You go, well, which one should we do first? And you can use this kind of impact measurement to understand that. Making it tangible. It's really important. How do we know that we've made an impact? How do we see that we've made the impact? What are the indicators? How do we notice a change? So there's a longer conversation here about quantitative and qualitative, and then we start getting into continuous innovation, but I'm going to park that for a moment, and while we still have the screen, kind of go through, well, how do we measure it? There are literally hundreds of different points that you could measure from. For an example, you could look, and we'll kind of loosely use the energy supplier example, you could use customer experience, you could use operations and efficiency, you could use engagement and growth. There are a few others. I mean, breaking that down a little bit, within customer experience, you go, well, how satisfied are the customers? We could look at brand sentiment, we can look at the NPS scores, or what's their average waiting times, what's the average resolution time, or even just sort of the cross-channel continuity. Like, well, we can see how customers are moving from one channel to another and they're having a seamless experience. There's lots of different things we could look at with that. Around operations and efficiencies, we could look at decreasing the total calls, kind of obvious one, but also decreasing calls by type. Like, okay, we've got the complaint calls, we've got the how do I do this calls, we've got the other calls. It's like there's different ways, and the difference between, say, the complaint calls and the how do I do this calls is like, well, one, the how do I do this, maybe there's some extra information we can give to educate and help people that they don't need to phone up and they just need to understand how to use things more. And then that kind of rolls down into decreasing the maintenance costs. If you look at the cost per head for each person in a call center, they need a system to use, they need lighting, seats, heating, whatever, and then you can spiral this out into so many beautiful directions. It gets into a bit like a beautiful mind, and you've got this crazy wall going up. I've got 200 KPIs, which are the right 6 that I need for this? Or anyway. You can look at the engagement and growth. So looking at engagement and growth, you get around increasing the total customers. Well, okay, so we want to decrease the total calls, increase the customers. This is awesome. We want to increase the activity of customers. It's great, we've got 2 million people downloaded our app, but only 100,000 are using them. Okay, so how do we start looking at that? Ultimately kind of increasing revenue, increasing sales, engaging specific audience segments. You start looking at it and go, well, we've got, a good large audience, but actually this really important, influential, or maybe valuable audience segment we're not reaching as well. How do we specifically look at reaching this audience segment? So in order to work out which of the hundreds and hundreds you can do, it's really important to tie it back to those original business goals. It's like, well, if we're all about reducing cost, then let's pick like the 10, 20 that are going to tell us that we're reducing cost. Or if it's around growing the audience, let's pick those ones that show us that the audience is growing. You have a hypothesis and you want to sort of test the solutions or changes you're making. You need to learn in order to move on to the next phase of doing it. So maybe you're doing a huge program of change. Okay, so it's reducing cost, but maybe there's an extra bit around there increasing the engagement. But phase 1 is very much targeted towards one set of goals, and phase 2 of the project is targeted towards a different set of goals. So it's looking at how you map those together. And in some cases, I mean, let's be honest, in a large organization, in some cases it's, well, who am I showing the results to, and who are they showing the results to, and what's really important to them? Like, as long as we can be satisfied that we're doing a good job, we're improving people's experiences, it becomes a game of like, well, how do we continue doing this? And much like the kind of innovation example, it's like, well, how do you show that you're doing innovation if you're happy that you're doing it, but your boss or your boss's boss or the stakeholders don't get it? How do we need to make it useful and important to them? So for me, the measuring part of design impact is becoming really the most exciting part of the process. Like, I love going off and doing the research and all the ideas and everything, but really measuring it, that's where you know that you're doing good work. And to that point, I think there should always be an element of risk involved. You know, you shouldn't be just measuring the things that you know that are going to come back. You should be measuring the things that you're not too sure which way it's going to go. You know, something that you can learn from. So it's measure the things that you don't know, the things that might come back negative, and then you can use those insights to make better improvements. If you're always going to measure the safe stuff, it's not really going to be that helpful. I've got just like 2 minutes more. I'm hoping it sticks. Okay, so just to bring it all together, I'll be super quick and you can chat to me afterwards. Maybe I can just show you the slides afterwards. Come on. Okay, so quickly, using scale to understand the real problem or the objective. You know, zooming in and out at scale, looking at the Amazon button type thing. Well, we've got one picture up. Okay, that's kind of working. No? Okay. The next one is scale takes time. Honestly speaking, scale does take time. You know, you scale with control, and scale generally happens as step changes. If you're going to roll something out that will affect 30 million customers, you are not going to push a button and release it to 30 million customers all at once. It takes time. There's a lot to learn from startups in how they grow and they scale. You know, you go from an idea to a concept, to a prototype, to a pilot, to more scaled growth. Even within the human factor within that, sometimes you find that some of the people are not right for every phase of scale. Some people are very good at incubating and starting something at the idea or the concept or the prototype stage, but when it comes through to a pilot or scaled growth, you need a different person in that role or a different skill set to make these things happen. And then this one I can talk to. So the next point is organizational readiness. I mean, this is like a huge factor. Come on, there we go. Is the organization actually ready to do this? I mean, you've got to like have those questions and start it and understand. Do you have enough buy-in at the top? It's really important. There's a senior person that's going to support this, that's going to help you navigate some of these things and make it go through. Is there enough buy-in at the grassroots level? Is it culturally accepted? Do people want to do it? And this could be about an innovation lab. It could even be about just releasing a new tool. You know, a CEO goes, great, we're going to do a new tool for our employees. They're going to be awesome and they can do this. And the employees are going, we hate it, we don't want to use it, we're just abandoning it. You need to make sure you've got those two things. In some cases, the departments, the people, the roles and the responsibility, you know, if you just look at it in a simple way, is there going to be someone to populate the content to go onto an app or a website? You know, who is going to pick up the phone and answer it when someone phones up, I don't know what this is, or making a complaint? You know, who's going to train the people at the human touch points? You know, you release a new product, they go into a store and ask about it, and they go, well, I've got no idea, I'll look at the website as much as you have. And then it died. Oh my goodness, back to the start. Let me skip to the end. I think there's like 2 left. There we go. So, literally 3 left. Fantastic. There's visions, there's roadmaps, and then there's continuous innovation. So when we're doing a lot of these scale things, you have to have a vision, you understand what it is you're trying to do, you've got a core roadmap that gets you there. Sometimes now it's being much more challenged around continuous innovation. We've got to have an MVP, we've got to show results quicker, we need to get something out there. That gets into an awesome topic of growth hacking. One of my favorite kind of pet passions at the moment is around, well, an MVP is never, you know, ready when it's launched. It's kind of launched in prototypes. How do you scale it and grow it and improve it? But then also, how do you do some growth hacking to engage people to use it and understand what they're doing and go on from there? So there's a couple of challenging schools of thought depending on your organization and the projects you're doing, whether you want to go more traditional with a vision and a roadmap, or whether you want to be much more agile and rapid. Yeah, I mean, measuring the design work is just really critical for success, for satisfaction. You know, I think there's no two ways about it. And then the last one before it dies on me is just, you know, in this massive world of scale and continuous innovation and growth and improvement that everyone in this room, I'm assuming, is challenged on, you know, The impact is really contextual to the problem that you're trying to solve, to the business that you're in, to the people that your design's going to reach. There's not a cookie cutter. It is very contextual. It's based on what you're actually doing. But there are ways of doing it. Thank you very much.